Hello, the Ask Me Anything session today is with Toni Caradonna, who is a blockchain revolutionary and a CTO at Porini Foundation, offering technological solutions for the good of nature. Hello, Toni.
Hi, pleased to meet you.
Pleased to meet you too. So can you tell us what are the origins of Porini Foundation and how you got involved?
So there is two important elements of the origins. One is more an anecdotal element. I helped to save a wallet from a person who said, "Oh, I have problem with my computer. Can you recover my wallet?" And I helped. And so he says, "Oh, you can have something." And I said, "I don't need money, but we are creating a foundation, so you can donate." So that's the anecdotal part. And the other part is that my co-founder and CEO of Porini Foundation is Roman Eiholzer, and he has worked with IUCN, which is a very big global organization for nature conservation. So you have to understand, like, countries are member of IUCN and WWF is a member of IUCN. So it's very big, very global, very slow, and very processes take a long time to take place there. So Roman, who worked there, said, if we create a foundation, we can help accelerate these processes. So that's what he did when he said, okay, I create the foundation. Do you want to help? And then he also invested in this foundation and says, if we have this tool, we can accelerate the processes and help to the nature conservation community, which is not very tech averse, to use this technology and to empower them so that they're not left behind with new technologies. And I think that's the origin. That was I think in 2017 or 18. It was also at that time when I made the first smart contract for the United Nations, where we all again find out the challenges for big organizations when it comes to adopting new technologies. Processes are not clear, regulatory aspects are not clear, and to set up the foundation in Switzerland was also very helpful because we have a very clear regulatory framework. Not only do we know what we do, but also the regulator knows what we do, and we have a very clear framework when it comes to implement the technology, be it for tax reason, for legal reason. So this is very helpful, and that's more or less the origin of the foundation. The foundation is a very young foundation. Usually foundations are old and established, and we're a baby foundation. So we were just at the meeting lately, and there was a foundation who's sunsetting, who was like 30 years of activities. We're at the opposite end. We're still a baby. So
you are a IUCN special unit then?
I'm not allowed to talk on behalf of IUCN. You have to ask them if we're a special unit, but we work very closely, very intensively. We were just at the IUCN World Congress, which is only every 4 years. So we work very intensively with them and help them to accelerate programs. Yeah, absolutely. And most focusing on the green list. There is the red list of endangered species that everybody knows, but the green list is a new list. It's a positive list, and that has just started its work, and that's our main focal point.
Great. So I have a question about the sustainable blockchain. So you've created this in 2018, and it sounds very interesting because the goal is to have a net zero energy blockchain. Sounds impossible. So how do you guys want to achieve this, or have you already achieved this?
Yeah, we have achieved it, and it's not only my merit. So it's not that I invented something that nobody has thought before. So there is various aspects. When you think of blockchain, often people think it's Bitcoin, it's Ethereum, it's a lot of energy consumed. I always compare blockchain with public transport. There's airplanes, but there is trains, there is bicycles, and depending on what you want to do and where you want to go, you choose a different setup for public transport. And that's what we do. So we don't have a public permissionless blockchain. currently, if you are public and permissionless at the same time, the best way to use it is with a lot of energy. So what we have is a proof of authority consensus algorithm based on click. What this means is the nodes that operate the blockchain are not doing calculation heavy processes. That's one thing. And there's only very few nodes. In the sum, what it means, we use the energy of 7 to 10 light bulbs. That's really very little. And why net zero? The energy that we do use, we compensate it in CO2 processes. We also make sure that the nodes that are operated in data centers that have renewable energy, that even what is being used makes sense as what kind of energy use. And so that's why it is net zero. It is very, very important to use a technology that is gentle on the energy consumption. For nature conservation organization, it would be never possible to do projects on a public permissionless blockchain, exactly for this reason. And so if you think of CO2, is like the best is to avoid it, the second best is to reduce it, and the third best is to compensate it. So we do the two things, we reduce and we compensate it. We cannot avoid it, but if you compare our transactions, we are 4 times more efficient per transaction than the Visa network. So we are so it means we even do an impact compared to non-blockchain solutions.
Thanks, great.
Okay, so in this context, is it possible that to have a sustainable blockchain on a global scale?
The simple answer is yes, and then we need to go into detail. So what does it mean global? Is it for a number of transactions and people? So there is ways to solve these problems with the level 2 infrastructure on top of the blockchain that we have set up. And then there is other questions on like global, is it in several jurisdictions? So that's also possible. Currently, when you say blockchain, it's just a technology, and then you look at, okay, what do you want to use with this technology? For me, it's a bit comparison with electrical power. You can't stop once it's invented, but you can regulate it, and I think you have to regulate it. So yeah, we are very, very aware of the challenges for participants, for users, for governments, for regulatory bodies. So what we do is we make sure we are more restrictive with all the challenges when it comes to KYC, AML, and PEP and stuff. So we're we do more that we need to do, just to say, well, our goal is to have impact, to have more efficient and more transparent processes, because that's ultimately what's the benefit of the technology. And we don't care about the technology, but we care about the benefits. And typically big global organizations have a lot of internal frictions. There are a lot of donation organizations. For example, if you donate something here in Switzerland, you have to give them to the Swiss organization. They take 8%, they send it to their central organization, wherever that is, they take another 8%, and then those organizations send it to the ultimate beneficial organization that has another friction. So it's slow, there's a lot of friction, and of course all these several unities in between, these intermediaries, they use that money because they do work. But if this work can be replaced, which is a boring work filling out Excels, by an infrastructure solution like a blockchain, I think it makes sense to use it. So we offer transparency and then efficiency, and in terms of global scale, absolutely a big yes.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. So the next very interesting thing or solution that we know that you are creating or using is something called Nature Collectibles. So this idea to use NFTs, non-fungible tokens, to support conservation projects, or in general fundraising in the whole ecosystem of fundraising. So yeah, could you tell us how it works in general, and what was your experience with this particular solution?
So we call it Nature Collectibles because that's something that I pushed on a bit. I don't like these hype cycles that you have in blockchain. I've been through a couple of them. Currently, it's the NFT hype cycle. I think at one point that might be burned. There's a lot of actors with doubtful ambitions. So that's why we call it Nature Collectibles. What we do, so there's different ways to look at it. So we want to, my personal opinion is that we have three waves of digitalization. The first wave of digitalization was digitalization of data. So you have websites and emails that has big consequences on organization and people. Then the second wave of digitalization is digitalization of communities. So you have social media, again, a big impact on organization and people. Now we're in the third wave of digitalization, and it's digitalization of values. That can be monetary values, but that can be other values. And the fact that I cannot copy paste a Bitcoin, whereas I can copy paste an MP3 music file, that's something very, very powerful. So what we do is we bring back ownership over data, and that's very powerful. So if it's non-fungible, it's even more precise, so that you can identify exactly it. It's all about digitalization. So if you have a protected area that has 59 birds that need protection, you can identify and have a digital representation of that, and it cannot be copy pasted, and that's the power of it, and that's why we use this technology. And then what we do basically is we have always a conservation actor. For example, Nature Seychelles. So it's an organization that has the power to actually have impact. Then we have a species that can be an animal, so the Seychelles magpie, for example. And then we have a location. So the space is also important. Where is it? What's the diversity of the space? And what we do is we want to have the digital aspect of donations. We think there's a next generation of donators, as there is a next generation of nature conservationists, and they're all digital. It's all happening on your mobile phone. It's important to understand there's more people on the planet that have access to mobile phones that have people that have access to toilets. So it's all through the mobile phone. So what we've done is, people don't understand blockchain. They understand apps and they understand web shops. So we have an application where you can buy a digital representative, so a nature collectible, in a web shop. And it means, okay, I have made a donation, and what I receive is a collectible. And I can have an emotional and effective connection to the thing that is maybe on the other side of the pound. So instead of having a receipt for my donation, I have a collectible. So we have a lot of gamification things planned in our roadmap. So when you have 3 of them, for example, you can actually send them to us, and then we give you a physical collectible card. We have a secondary market for these nature collectibles. So first thing is, it's a primary market. We sell them. 100% of these revenues go to the Nature Conservation Organization. Everybody can see, has my donation arrived? That's one thing. Secondary market is a bit more complex. In the secondary market, what we do is we apply a Harburger tax, which is a concept of, it's a sweet spot between ownership, total private ownership, and governance by structure. So what it is, to oversimplify it again, if I have a nature collectible, I cannot stop anyone buying it from here. It's always for sale. What does it mean? If somebody is ready to pay 2 times the price of my nature collectibles, it's gone. All I have left is a trace of it. It shows, okay, at one point I did make a contribution. The buyer who buys it for double the price, I get 110% of what I pay. So it's a good thing. I make money, the other guy pays it, and the difference between what I earn and the other man pays, or a woman pays, is distributed amongst the actors. So what we create is the opportunity to have recurrent revenues for the protected area. So to sum it up, it's, again, oversimplified, a digital representation that is unique of your donation. Mm-hmm. And so it's a receipt that is digital that can be traded. That's a bit emotionless, but it's really nice. Go and have a look. I don't know if I'm allowed to screen share. So currently we have Nature Seychelles. We have that's the magpie. Then we have, I think I can share. So
yes, can try.
Okay.
The fish,
no, it's deactivated.
Yes?
So we have a fish, we have a sweetwater fish, we have a bird, and we have a harpy. And so it's in the Seychelles, it's in Mexico, and it's in Colombia. We have lined up a horse that was extinct, that is reintroduced in the Mongolia. We have other projects that are lined up. So this is the harpy eagle, and this is the direct split fin. And if you buy number one, you will actually see a very nice, I think I can share that too, a very nice animation that that has a dynamics to it. I'll share that as well. There you go. So the owner of number one has something like this, and it just creates this illusion of a hologram, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
So that's for nature conservation, and we had a massive success. So number one was 50% of these 59s were sold in 12 weeks, and of the series number two, like we haven't even announced it, and people were buying it because someone discovered it on the website. They said, oh, it's already live, so they were starting to buy it. So it has a good impact. The World Economic Forum was writing about it, and the CNN was making a report about it. So to understand also for the nature conservation organization, it's not just the money, it's also, you know, to create a problem of awareness in the media. It's for, there's a lot of rangers that work for free, that they get rewarded, you know, for their work with recognition. I think that's also a very important aspect.
Very interesting. So so I would like to take an occasion and maybe share with you like some kind of an idea, and just ask you, does it make sense to actually use the blockchain related solution to solve the problem, or maybe address some kind of a problem? It's precisely, it's about you know, planting new forests, and you know, just on the high level, when I think about the whole, you know, some initiatives about planting something, it's a, and you also think about blockchain when you, where you have this kind of a, you know, in general, this kind of a mining the idea, so that you create some kind of a value that you know, has not existed before. It's kind of a similar. So it sounds like maybe you can use blockchain related, at least ideas, not maybe technologies, also to like create some additional value in the nature space. Not only donate, but somehow use this technology to create this value, and the real things like forests, like trees, they're being like created out of nothing, let's say, by some kind of a community that is you know, together to achieve this goal of reforestation, or you know, whatever the goal is.
So it's interesting that you mentioned we are actually working in a CO2 project, actually in several CO2 projects, and this is absolutely possible. What you're describing. I don't like to talk too much of projects that are not live yet, but we're quite far ahead, and it will be live towards the end of the year, so that usually, like, retail users can have an experience. And I'll make it very short and try to oversimplify the things again. So if you think about or address the CO2 sinks, of course, there's various standards on how to look at it. So we have projects in Africa where we actually, so when you plant a tree, forest is one thing. It can be good or bad. If you chase away the people who live there where you plant a tree, it's a bad thing, of course. But if you improve the livelihood of the people who live where you plant trees, and it makes sense, then you can even generate CO2 certificates and you can put them on the market. So there is a lot of bottom-up initiatives in the CO2 voluntary market, particularly because it's a small market. It's 300 to 400 millions. It's not very much. We're in contact with some very powerful blockchain people who have assets who say, well, this market is small, we can buy that up. And so we expect a lot of drive there. Then, of course, let's look at the tree situation, which is just one element of CO2 things. They can have many situations. So the tree situations is, it's always the monitoring, the reporting, and the validation. So how can you ensure that this tree actually is still there in 10 years? How can you distribute the monetization of the CO2 certificates over 10 years? So usually you work with satellite data. We work closely with Tree Economy, who also received the fund from us. It's an organization that helps monitoring, reporting, and validating. And we have also a process where we actually interact. So local communities in the place, they have interactions with, again, their mobile phone. They don't need a special tool to interact with the tree. And there we have a solution that is not a QR code, but is something more sophisticated with NFC, not NFT, but with NFC. So absolutely true. You can create incentivations locally and globally to have a cooperative approach to actually create CO2 sinks and ensure that they stay sinks for a long time. So with diversity, like what is more important, the small species is important to save a lion or a worm, what is more important for diversity? It's a big debate. Nevertheless, I think we can act now. We can have some measurement, can be good or not very good, but we will have a figure that says, okay, that's a diversity and that has a value. We're not saying monetarily, but it has a value in a community and it can be incentivized or used as incentivization aspects. We follow also in the gaming space some projects where you actually create actions within a game and they have an impact in the real world. So we're working heavily on this. We're involved with some organization, and again, to come back on IUCN and the Green List. The Green List standard is a management standard. So we are working on adopting this standard slightly, that it is already being used for a CO2 certificate, which means a protected area on the space, on the planet, they are creating CO2 sinks because of their work. So all that is need done, it's 1 or 2 criteria out of 20 is to use this criteria and measure it. And once you can measure, you can manage, and you can also monetize. So we're heavily involved in this. It's not live. So that's why, and we have nice screenshots on the functionality and everything. It's all there, but it's not live.
So my last question regarding those, nature-related initiatives is about this project called Tech for Nature, where you partnership with some technological companies, but also with the Swiss National Park. So we would like to hear more about this particular initiative. What is the goal, and what is your role and role of your foundation?
Okay, so that's the project that I'm least involved in. So Roman would know all the details. So basically, the partnership is about. So you have a lot of data in such a national park, and just to show an example, there is one animal that is really rare, and they have a picture of it that is taken in January, and they only see it a year later. So because it has to go all the processes, the cameras are remote, you have to go and pick them up. Maybe a bear already dropped it and it's somewhere else. So it's a very long and slow process to actually see the data, and then there's the second process to analyze it and make contacts. So, and again, I'm not allowed to speak in behalf of the Swiss National Park, but what I understand is the vision is to have a live stream of what happens in the park. And to do that, of course, you need connectivity. That's one part. And the other part is you need to understand the data. So if you have a data stream, you don't want to have a person looking at it, but an AI. So these are the two most important things where you create connectivity and analysis to understand what is happening in the park. So that's the main focus. There is 2 smaller projects that I'm not involved in, and we're also looking at the challenges of, so there is different categories of parks, and so the Swiss National Park is a non-intervention park. So what they do is to ensure that nothing is done. So this and currently we are analyzing, in such a setting, is it possible to argue, well, because you do nothing, you create CO2 sinks? We are trying to understand, can that be used as an argument and still have additionality and improve the livelihood and all the other and permanence, all the other criteria you need for CO2 certificates.
So with your activities, you are realizing what has been branded as next-gen conservation. Yes, we've previously talked about it. So where do you plan to take your mission further?
Well, again, I have a strong belief that the biggest power is if we empower the actors. So I, like many organizations, want to keep control. My personal opinion is I want to give control away. I think it should be empowering and enabling organizations to be active in the space. And there is such a big gap globally in so many things, but also in know-how. And if you adopt early, that's really good. And I also think we should enable the next generation, not only of conservatives, people in conservation, but also the people who are kids now. You know, I want to give them a planet which is more or less okay. So I want to create awareness and combine, you know, the playfulness and the joyfulness that kids have and their naivete to approach the world, to onboard them and make sure, well, even if I'm playing a game, if I'm like as a kid, I play a game, why not have, that's just one thought I have, something that drops CO2 certificates in the same time you play, and do it like cat food. You know, you don't, if you sell cat food, you don't sell it to the cat, you sell it to the person who owns the cat. So we have the same approaches with incentivation. So if a kid, you know, wants to compensate, it's not the kid that has to compensate, but the parents, and then you empower and enable actions through influencer. And with influencer, I don't mean the person who has 10,000 followers, but the person who lives with his kid at home. And so we have a lot of ideas, and then all you need is partners that help you. So we're active also with XDAI Chain, who is very who has also very good tools in DeFi. We are very close to the regulator who helps us to make sure that we do things correctly. And again, I always see, you know, a planet in the universe, a blue planet that crosses this universe, and then I'm aware, well, actually I'm sitting on that planet, and I want to make sure it can keep traveling through this beautiful universe, you know, more or less okay. And there is a big danger currently, because there's so many people on the planet. It's a danger for nature, and if we can keep 30% of nature intact until 2030, that would be a big step. And it needs actions, and actions have to be incentivized. And that's my personal belief. I'm not speaking for Porini here. I think the externalization of costs, which is a consequence of capitalism, is a big challenge. And we have an amazing tool now, an amazing new technology that can handle this challenge. And we have concepts like the Harburger tax or other concepts where we actually can create a win-win-win situation for nature, for us, and directing actions in a place that makes sense, and where we can have a cooperation and synergies between actors.
Yes, I think this is amazing. And I think these two words, enablement and empowerment, I think are key words. And I think it's really, really important that we start to realize that in the space of business making, sustainability is not something that is in conflict, but it's like should be should be the part of business making.
Absolutely agree. And if I can make a call for action, I really think there's two situations in life. So there's complex problems and complicated problems. Complicated problems is like building a plant. You need a good plan, you need good engineers, and then if you know what you do, you can solve it. Complex problems are, for example, a nature conservation area. You know, if you put in a frog, maybe you think, okay, it eats the mosquitoes, but then something else happens. It's complex. You can't predict the action. So, and like relationships, a marriage is also complex. You can't do this and this happens. So you have complicated and complex problems. And I think there's two ways of act. There is, I don't know the English word. So there's one way to act where you say, okay, I need to understand the problem before I act. And this situation is good for a complicated problem. You need to understand a plant before you build it. But for a complex problem, like in nature, you will never understand a nature ecosystem fully. So you cannot understand before act, and that can stop your actions. So what I suggest what I always do is, like, if I have a complex problem where you don't know the results of your action, it's good to prototype, make small steps, learn from these small steps, and do the next steps. And what all the person on this planet can do is download the app, get a community token, and just play around. If you're afraid of blockchain, you think, it's new, I don't know, just download the app. It's called Green List Market. And then you say, okay, I want some community token. you can do transactions and get a feeling for, oh, okay, now I understand. I have nothing to lose. There's no money involved. Just let to get feeling for this community and be part of the movement.
Thank you, Toni, for this inspiring conversation. This was our last question, and it was great listening to your vision.
Thank you so much.